My name is William Carrington Thompson, and I was born November the 6th, 1915 at Chatham, Virginia. And I've lived here practically my entire life, except for time in military service. I was in the Navy for 3 years. I was one of four, the youngest of 4 children. I have 2 brothers who are deceased. One was a doctor, country doctor. The other one was an electrical engineer. They're both deceased. I have a sister who is 96 years old and is in a retirement community in Richmond. My father was a pharmacist and ran a country drugstore all his life. And my mother was a local native. Her father was county treasurer for a while, about probably 100 years ago. And
so tell me a little bit about well, first tell me their names. What was your father's name and your mother's name?
okay. I'm getting a little thirsty. My mother's name, her maiden name, was Irene White Vaden. She was born October the 5th, 1884. And she went to Averett, now Averett University, but it was a junior college then. She was a housekeeper all her life. She never was publicly employed. My father was Gerard Estes Thompson, a native of Charlotte County, Virginia, and he was born June the 22nd, 1876, 3 days before Custer's last stand. He moved here from Charlotte County and lived here all of his life. He was a pharmacist and operated a drugstore until about 1960. And he retired, and he died in a nursing home over at Danville. My mother was one of 10. My father was one of 9.
So now, what brought your father to Chatham?
Looking for a job. There was a drugstore here with an opening, and he came here. He had a 4th grade education, and he started in the drugstore, and finally studied pharmacy and passed the state bar, pharmacy bar, and stayed on here and prospered in a relative sense.
So how did your parents meet?
I don't know. I know how I met my wife, but I don't know how they met.
Okay. And so what was it like growing up in this town?
Oh, it was just small time life. I was a newspaper carrier. there was a daily in Danville, and I kept that. I started that when I was 9 years old.
Did you ride a bicycle? Or-
Yeah. Wish I still could. I love to. Then I was later special delivery messenger at the local post office. You know, whatever. Cause I did a lot of postal work for about 5 years. Then graduated from high school. And during that time, I was soda jerker in my father's drugstore for $3 a week, and I thought that was relative prosperity, and it was.
Did your other two brothers also have a paper route and worked in your father's store?
No, they didn't. I should have stayed in journalism, all right?
Why do you say that?
Well, it's more interesting. Well, it's not more interesting, but my father decided I was going to be a lawyer, and I've tried to be.
Why did he think you should be a lawyer?
I don't know, except he saw other people growing up. He observed old ex-governor Lee Trinkle of Virginia, and he figured that's the way he wanted to educate me, and he did.
And so were you the only one that he guided in that direction?
Yeah.
And what did your mother see you as doing, as a life career?
She didn't say. She just agreed with him.
So now, what kind of classes did you take in high school?
Oh, I took Latin and French and English and physics and biology and things like that.
That was kind of unusual at that time to offer that curriculum, wasn't
Yeah.
it? Did your other brothers and sisters follow you in taking this kind of classical?
Well, they were ahead of me. I was the youngest. I had to follow them.
Did you have big shoes to fill?
Yeah. I couldn't quite fill them.
So did you find that being the youngest in your family presented certain challenges?
Yeah. Try to keep up.
So were they, how much of a distance in terms of years were you from the oldest?
12 years.
And then the one next to you was how many years?
4.
Okay. And so when did you actually think seriously about becoming a lawyer?
When my father told me.
And how old were you?
I'd say 12.
Did you ever ask him why he wanted you to go into law?
I never questioned any judgment he made.
Really?
Yeah.
Why is
He
that?
was a strict disciplinarian. We, of course, had meals together. We couldn't speak without his permission. And he was a good disciplinarian. I'm thankful for it.
And so you grew up in a rather structured household.
Yeah.
Do you think that helped you in your career?
Yeah.
How so?
Having to share fate with other people, and having to realize your dependence on other people for your existence. which I still appreciate.
So now, what kind of town was Chatham when you were growing up? What kind of town was it? Did you have, was it mostly a farming community, or?
Yeah.
Describe it a little bit for me.
Hmm.
Describe it a little bit.
It was a farming community, and of course retail, and the county seat, the court business. I could have contact. In other words, when I was waiting for my papers to be delivered in the afternoon, I could go up and sit in the courtroom and listen to arguments of cases, and frequently did. I didn't understand what was going on, but I kept being interested in it.
And you just decided to do this on your own?
Well, my father was a predominating element in it.
Did he take you for the first time, when you first went to the courthouse to watch a case? Was it your father who took you, or did he tell you?
No, I went on my own.
Okay.
I got very interested in it, but I was too shy. I didn't push myself as much as I should.
What do you mean?
Hmm?
What do you mean you didn't push yourself?
Well, I waited for people to tell me what to do, rather than trying to make a decision on my own.
Okay. So what was it that you really liked about these cases that you looked at?
Just the fact that the humans were involved, and the conduct, the way people conducted themselves.
What were some favorite memories of that?
Oh, I don't know. I had an uncle that was murdered. That was a big family tragedy. Been tried out with all the intricacies, including jury trials and appeals and all those things. I kept in close touch with that.
How old were you when that happened?
I was 12.
About the same time your father thought about you going into
Yeah.
law. Do you think the two things were connected?
Could have been,
Was your uncle's murderer caught?
yes, and convicted
Okay.
and served a sentence. It was just one of those family tragedies that I reflect back on it even now.
So now, after you finished high school, did you already think about where you wanted to go to college?
Yes, I first wanted to go to the University of Virginia, but I was persuaded to go to Hampton-Sydney, which was, of course, much smaller. It was a Presbyterian school down in Prince Edward County, and I went there and liked it. Went 3 years, and ordinarily at the end of 2 years you could switch to law, but I waited till 3 to do that.
Why?
Well, I just kind of got tired of college. Although I was greatly inspired by college professors. I was very much impressed with them.
What did they do that was so impressive?
Well, it was the way they taught. They taught you, I mean, it was like individual instruction, recitation, and Bible. I took several courses in Bible, and liked it. And in those days, you recited in the classroom, and you were graded on a recitation. Then you had examinations, of course. And one of the great examination questions was, where did the Apostle Paul get his hair cut? And the scripture says, in Cenchrea Philippi, his head was shorn. They're the things that you remember about college.
So now, who were some of the professors who really inspired you? Who were some of the professors who really inspired you?
Dr. Massey, M-A-S-S-E-Y, Dr. J.B. Massey, and old Dr. W.H. Whiting. They're all dead now, of course. But they gave you an idea of what life might be like if I ever got there.
So what did they teach?
Whiting taught Latin and Greek and language. Massey taught Bible and religious stuff. Incidentally, I'm a religious Baptist. I've been a church member since I was 11.
Had you ever thought of going in the ministry?
No, but I should have. I'm a great admirer of ministers. I was a great admirer of Jerry Falwell. I'm a great admirer of this hour of prayer now, Shula. I think they've done a lot to keep us together as a civilization.
So these are the things. Who persuaded you to go to Hampton-Sydney? You said you wanted to go to UVA initially.
You know, I think it was a high school principal here who was an alumnus. And I think he persuaded me to do it. And I'm certainly glad that he did.
So what was it that he thought you really would needed, or that Hampton-Sydney would offer versus UVA?
Well, it would introduce me into phases of religious life, which was good living, I thought.
Mm-hmm. So now, after you finished Hampton-Sydney,
I didn't graduate.
okay,
Go ahead.
what happened after 3 years?
I transferred to law school at UVA. And
Had you thought of going to any other law school?
no.
What was it about UVA that made you want to go there?
I really can't say, except I had cousins who were there. And
Are these
the law school has always had a great name. And it was just natural to go there.
were these maternal or paternal cousins? Were these maternal or paternal cousins?
Maternal.
Okay.
You just wanted to get along in those days.
So, what was your time like at UVA? And were there any professors who really inspired you?
Yes, yes, there were. Yes, Judge Dobie, D-O-B-I-E, Hampton Dobie. He was a native of Norfolk, incidentally. He was later a judge. Roosevelt appointed him. And he was a great inspiration, as was Dean Ribble, R-I-B-B-L-E. He's bound to be dead, but he was a real good constructor. And
What were their specialties?
Dobie was on federal jurisdiction and legal history. Ribble was real property and constitutional law. I took a liking to constitutional law largely because of him.
Was he a strict constructionist?
I am, yeah. He was more liberal than I was more strict than he was. But we're getting a little deeper now. Of course, I looked upon law as the rule of law rather than the rule of force, as being the way civilization should be founded. But it's hard to put it over. And of course there are a lot of diversions and human traits like selfishness and things like that.
Did you have any debates over these different views of the law in any of your classes or with these professors?
Not as much as I wish it had been. I did a whole lot of, I'm getting ahead of myself now, trial work. I love trial work. I did a lot of it. Not always successful from the standpoint of gain, but the whole right of confrontation solves a lot of problems. Because I had to overcome the shyness that I was born with. I think I did that.
Do you think that you started that change of moving away from shyness in law school, or did it happen later?
Later.
Okay. So now, you were at UVA Law School from 1939 until?
No, from 36 to 39.
Okay, from 36 to 39. And then what happened after that?
Well, I came back here and began practice with an elder lawyer named Van Sant, V-A-N-S-A-N-T, who was not a native here, but a successful practitioner. And I practiced with him for 2 years, and then got a job as assistant to the Attorney General of Virginia. And went there.
Let me back you up for a second. How did you meet Van Zandt? How did you get to know him?
Just being a fellow Chathamite.
So you had known him before you went to law school?
Yeah.
Okay.
But not close.
Okay. Did he offer you the
Yeah.
job once he knew you were finishing?
Yeah.
And what kind of lawyer was he?
Just a general practice, not a specialist in anything. But he was a good student, and he taught me real well.
What did he really teach you? What aspect of law do you think you really learned from him?
Learned legal procedures and stuff like that. See, procedures is hard to explain. You got to do it to learn it, and that's what I was doing. I left him, and later came back. I was in the Navy for 3 years. And when I went to Richmond as Assistant Attorney General, that was a real good experience.
How did you get that position?
Largely political,
Explain
from
that.
friends. They knew there was an opening there, and asked the Attorney General to appoint me, and he did.
Now, who were these friends? From Chatham?
Yeah.
Were these fellow lawyers?
See, my mother's brother was Robert Vaden. He was a state senator, and my mother's sister married a dentist here, Hale Fitzgerald, who was mayor. And they were pushing me, and that's the way I got there. And of course, in that job, my main job was handling criminal cases on appeal. In other words, if the court had granted a writ, I had to brief the thing for the commonwealth and argue it and wait for its decision. Real good experience. And I was associated with other assistants who were real good lawyers, better lawyers than I was. And I learned a whole lot from them.
What were some of the things that you really learned from them?
Well, mainly brief writing and oral arguments. You got to make an oral argument before 7 justices. You got to prepare it. You're still gonna get surprised.
Well, now, how was that for you, being a very shy individual?
Well, I was gradually overcoming that, trying to, and did, to some extent. I still got it in me, as you can tell, but
what were some of the things that you did to overcome that shyness?
just keeping at it, keep working on a daily basis. And if you found a superior practitioner, just follow his career.
Well, now, was this the first time when you were in Richmond that you came in contact with a lot of people in government
Yeah.
throughout the state?
Yeah. Governor Tuck was governor right after World War II, and he would frequently confer with the Attorney General on legal issues. The Attorney General would take me along to handle, to tote the book, so to speak. But it was a real good experience for me to be in touch with people like that, and to represent the Attorney General in extraditional cases. So I had a real education.
Well, let's back up for a minute and go back to the period of the beginning of World War II. Where were you at the beginning of the war in December? of 41?
I was in Richmond with the Attorney General. I applied for and got a commission in naval intelligence, but I was too young for that, so they transferred me to line duty in the Navy. And
How old did you have to be to get that position?
under 28, I was 27. I went to Naval School on seamanship, and
Where was the Naval School? Where was it?
in New York City.
That must have been very interesting for you. Was that the first time you had been to a northern city?
Yeah. Then they assigned me to coastal convoy and patrol. You know, convoying these tankers coming up from Texas, and I had to do it all by pipeline, but we did it that way. Of course, the submarines were knocking off these tankers whenever they could. And I did, several months of that. Then I was transferred and wound up out on the Pacific coast with CBs. CB don't mean anything to you, but they were massing us in what they call Gropac 14 for the invasion of Japan. Thank God Harry Truman saved us from that. But I wound up over in China. I was in China for a month or two and came back with discharge from that. I spent 3 years in the Navy. I went in as an ensign and was discharged as a full lieutenant.
What made you decide to go into the Navy?
The fact that I could get a commission.
How is it you could get a commission in the Navy but not in the Army?
Well, mainly through a lawyer, an elderly lawyer in the Attorney General's office suggested that I do it. That I would ultimately be drafted anyway, and that's really what I did. Although I was married and a father too.
I'm going to get to asking you about that in just a minute. I want to finish up talking about your naval career. What was it like for a person who grew up in a small town to suddenly be out in the broader world? I mean, you were in New York, and I assume you went to San Diego, or was it to another location on the Pacific?
In New York both times.
Oh, okay, and then from New York you went to China?
No, I went to Coastal Convoy.
Coastal Convoy. And then to China. Tell me a little bit about your experiences. What was it like to
Like being in college.
Explain.
You had very little to do. Because Coastal Convoy, you're trying to protect those tankers, and did. Because it had been real bad before, but it had gotten a whole lot better. And in China, we were repatriating all those Japanese caught over there by the surrender, you see.
Well, now here you were, a small town boy from Virginia, and suddenly you're around people from different countries. What was that like for you? Did that change your perception?
I don't think so. As I say, it was just like being in college, living away from home.
Uh-huh. To get to know a lot of people.
Not too many.
And so let's talk about your personal life. Like to know a little something about when you met your wife.
I met her at a wedding of one of my cousins, and she sang. I'd never seen her before, but I was very much taken by her, and we were married 3 years later. She was from Gretna. Her father was an undertaker. And her mother was a very active person in the community. And
So why don't you give us your wife's name? Your wife's name.
Margaret
And what was her maiden name?
Colbert, C-O-L-B-E-R-T.
Okay.
We were married 64 years.
So now, from the time that you first met her until you married, that was 3 years, you said. So what did you have to do to get in her good graces?
To just go to see her.
Now, did you first see her in Chatham?
Gretna.
In Gretna. And that's where your cousin was
Yeah.
married? Okay. And so did it take almost 3 years to convince her?
Yeah.
You didn't have any competition, did you?
I'm sure I did, but I can't recall the way it was.
But when you all got married, what year was that?
39.
And you all chose to live here in Chatham?
Yeah. Lived with my parents.
Oh. For how long?
Oh. Then we moved to Richmond when I went there. Came back to live with my parents until about 48. After World War II, I went back to the Attorney General's office as a full assistant. Stayed there about a year and decided to come back and practice with Van Zandt. And when I got back in April of 47, I decided to run for Commonwealth Attorney in the primary of August 47. And lo and behold, I was elected.
Now, what made you decide to run for office?
Well, a lot of people were urging me to do it, mainly because of antagonism toward the incumbent.
Explain all of that for us.
Well, he'd been in the office 16 years, and he had just worn out. You wear out after a while in public office. And I was getting requests to run to get rid of him, which I did.
Was he somehow supporting issues that some of the people didn't want him to support? Is that what happened?
No, it was largely a fact that he had just been there too long.
And who was this?
Joseph Whitehead.
Okay. And who were your primary backers? Who were the main supporters to push you along?
Preston Moses, who was the editor of the local Star Tribune, local weekly. And he was getting in politics himself. And he did a whole lot of pushing for me. And I wouldn't have made it without him.
What did he do to help you?
Gave me a lot of good publicity. and friendly endorsement.
How did you get to know him?
He was starting out as an editor when I was starting out as a lawyer. And we just got friendly.
Did you all belong to the same church or the same?
Same party,
Okay.
in the Democratic Party.
Mm-hmm. And were you involved even before you decided to run in a lot of politics, party politics in this area?
Not a lot, but a little bit.
In what way?
Well, when I first got out of law school, I was put on the county Democratic Committee here in Pennsylvania County.
Who put you on that committee?
I don't know, but I kind of, that was in the days of Roosevelt had saved us from the Depression, and that was largely my backing.
Did you feel the effects of the Depression? Did you and your family feel the effects of the Depression?
Oh yeah, we always did. I never owned an automobile till I was 31 years old.
Really? Wow.
I knew what poverty really was, and still do. And, but I've been very lucky. A lot of people have given me a lot of help. And I've tried to live like I should have.
So tell me about the first few years in the House of Delegates. What were some of the greatest challenges that you faced?
In the House of Delegates?
Yes.
Let's see, that was 1960. Well, that was the beginning of the sales tax, and I don't remember too much about the controversial issues. They were within the Democratic Party.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't national issues or state issues either. I served in the House of Delegates for 8 years, and served on the Roads and Internal Navigation Committee, Education, and Courts of Justice. And each time it got more responsible. I was one of the backers of the community college system and the arterial highway system. Of course, there were many others too, but I enjoyed those phases of it.
Did you find that there was a lot of opposition to those issues?
Yeah. Those bodies, to be successful in them, you've got to give and take. You can't. You're running against your fellow delegates for publicity, really. That's what you're doing. But back in then, the only compensation you got was your board bill at Hotel Richmond. And I enjoyed that.
Now you were continuing your private practice.
Yeah,
Because that was your bread and butter at that time.
yeah.
And what kinds of cases were you dealing with mostly?
Oh, any kind of civil disputes, personal injury, and things like that.
Now, you were in the legislature during this period of the Young Turks. Or
No, that was before me.
that was just before you. Okay, I'm sorry.
That was in '54.
True. Okay.
Uh,
But some of them were still in office
yeah.
when you were there.
Yeah.
What kinds of, because you were more conservative than many of them. So
Yeah.
did you find yourself butting heads at any point in time with them?
No. I just tried to string along and be effective,
Mm-hmm.
not stir up anything, not increase taxes or things like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's about it.
Now, what made you then go decide that you were going to run for the state senate?
A vacancy occurred, and old Senator Wyatt, Landon Wyatt, was retiring, and I just think that would be better than staying in the House of Delegates. And that was before all this real pushing took place. And I was elected along with Senator Stone from Oswald, Bill Stone. And he was a great help to me, as were most of my colleagues.
How so?
Hmm.
How so? How were they help?
Advising you on issues and positions to take. And we were elected. I served in the Senate 4 years. I really liked that. As a smaller body, you could be more effective. And I tried to be.
What were some of the things that you championed during that period?
Well, I was against liquor by the drink.
Why was that?
Largely local. I predicted successfully that the main thing it did was triple or double the cost of your drink. But I was on a committee that handled all ABC legislation. And I thought I got to be an authority on that. But liquor by the drink was pressure from hotels and restaurants and people like that. And it'll never be changed. But it real departure in the system. The old Chief Justice John Eggleston had been in the Senate. He's from Norfolk, you know, and he had set up the ABC system, which is a model way to handle the prohibition issue. After prohibition was repealed, we were really lucky that he did that. I mean, from a revenue standpoint as well as a moral standpoint. I mean, you got to recognize the fact that the liquor is a legitimate article of commerce, and how do you best regulate it? And we came to, I think, an excellent solution of it.
You were there for 4 years, and what happened after that? You were still in private practice.
Yeah, well, I decided to quit. And I was in effect told that I would have a judgeship if I quit. So I quit.
Who told you this?
My colleague, Senator Stone, and Delegate Philpott, who had gotten to be the ruling people in Richmond. And so I retired.
So was this something that you were always interested in doing?
No, it wasn't. My ambition in the legal world was to be Commonwealth attorney here and make $5,000 a year. That was the extent of my ambition right there.
And so how did they convince you then to go into, to take the circuit court position?
Well, there was a vacancy coming up, and they suggested that I take it.
Were you a little apprehensive about taking it, or?
Well, I was apprehensive about any judicial position because you have to make hard decisions, and I wanted to be able to do that and try to be fair at the same time. That was my motivation. I went up, when I was elected, I went up to the circuit court, went up to the bench, and looked under the bench, and there was a Girlie Magazine. Somebody had left for me.
Did you ever find out who did it?
No.
And so, what was that experience like?
It was good. I started as a pure beginner and tried to put away all my preconceived notions about things and try to make a court system what it should be from a learner's standpoint. And I got a lot of help from the bar and from the public.
What did you think the court should be?
Be just and fair. And they're hard words to elaborate. I was 57 years old then. I should have started earlier.
Why is that?
Well, that's just the way I think it should be. I think judges should be selected probably in their 40s.
Does that have anything to do with perspective or what?
Well, I've had so many notions about the judiciary that it's hard to come to any real good conclusions.
Do you think that some of your perspectives were framed by your experience in the General Assembly?
Probably, but I couldn't say particularly with this or that, so forth.
Were you, as a strict constructionist, I'm going to go this route, as a strict constructionist, did you think that the courts had become too activist?
Yeah, sure did. I thought questions of policy should be left to the legislative branch. That the court is not a super legislature. You should proceed slowly, declaring anything unconstitutional, because that's just your opinion.
Mm-hmm.
It may be shared with others, but new policies ought not to come out of litigation. They ought to come out of legislation.
So give me an example of some of these problems that you saw that reflect this particular position.
Well, I'd be hard put to do that. You take the big issues like abortion. Well, I think a female has a right to an abortion, but it doesn't have to be a federally created right. It's a right that can be solved on the state level, and we shouldn't create these new federal rights when it's totally unnecessary. The Constitution doesn't say anything about abortion. Courts should be limited to the implementation of the Constitution, and not the vague provisions of due process of law. That's your opinion of the Constitution, not the Constitution itself.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I could get in a lot of trouble with views like that. I like to say that my mind stays open on issues. I don't already decided. I wrote two opinions on the death penalty. Now, I personally favor, I don't favor anything, but I mean, I can accept the fact that the death penalty is a legitimate punishment for certain crimes that are so heinous as they are. But I could live in a society without a death penalty. But I don't think the judiciary should go in there and say the Constitution says you can't have a death penalty. So, I wrote two opinions on the Supreme Court, Bassett against Commonwealth and Justice against the Commonwealth, which were very aggravated factual issues where there were multiple killings and just revolting against society, and especially against females. But I think that whoever is trying the issue ought to have the option of imposing the death penalty if they think it appropriate, rather than to say automatically we're not going to have it. See, the court, through Justice Lewis Powell, said you couldn't have it in rape cases. I don't think he should have said that.
Okay. All right, let's go back to this issue of your views on the death penalty and this change. You were on the circuit court when let me see, was it right before you went on the circuit court that the Supreme Court removed or made unconstitutional
right
the death
after
penalty?
that, yeah.
Okay. So did that present some challenges for you as you were hearing cases?
Yes. There was a death penalty case from this court, local court. I hadn't tried the original case, but it was reversed and sent back for retrial. And I had retried, and it wound up with a penalty of 80 years, I believe, something like that. Same case. After that, I've never been in a death penalty situation on the circuit. I've been cases where I thought it would have been appropriate, but the jury decided otherwise, and it's on the way out legislatively, and that's the way it should be. That's what the majority of the public wants. But I think it should be, as an individual, I think it should be preserved as an option.
So you're in favor of simply giving this power to the states?
Yeah.
As opposed
That's
to...
where it is anyway.
What about in cases involving federal crimes?
Same thing. Well, it's hard. It's hard to stand up. That's the difficult part of the circuit judge, is sentencing people. But you've got to do it. And if you make a mistake, it won't show up for years. But
were there any cases that you found particularly problematic or difficult to decide while you were on the circuit court?
I don't think so. I'm sure there are. I just don't remember them.
So now, how long were you on the circuit court?
7 years.
And during that time period, you had one of your friends who is now a powerful leader in the General Assembly, who decided that he wanted you to be not only nominated but receive the position of being on the state Supreme Court. So I want you to tell us about that particular time period when you were nominated and up for nomination to be selected by the General Assembly to be on the court, because you were the first one in 50 years to go through that particular process. So tell me about that.
I don't know where to begin. Well, Linwood Holden was governor, and he was a Republican. And the Democratic leaders wanted to keep him from filling the vacancy, which had been done, as you said, for years. The old procedure was, and a lot of this is gossip, the bar would endorse 3 nominees for the vacancy. The governor would have the court in for dinner at the mansion, and they would tell him which one to select, and he would do that. And I was the first legislative selection in many, many years. And that's the story. The fight then was in the Democratic caucus for the House and the Senate. Not together, but separately, see. And I had been in the Assembly, which was a big factor for me. I mean, I knew the legislators personally. and I was too old, though. I was 64 years old. But I had been through the Constitution of 1970, which increased control over the judiciary, created the Judicial Inquiry and Review Commission. And one thing about a sitting judge, he don't want to give up any power, and he don't want to leave. That's why we came in with the arbitrary, when you reach 70, you're gone. Regardless of, I helped write a lot of that, regardless of when you were elected or how long you'd been there. And I was 64. And I was really too old for that. But I took it. And realizing that I had to go off at 70, whether I wanted to or not. And as it is, I went off when I was 67. The main reason for my decision, though, looking back on it, was that I didn't want to move to Richmond. I wanted to stay here and see back and forth. I couldn't give it the attention that it deserved. So
You're talking about your reason for leaving the court?
See, I had an office in Danville,
Mm-hmm.
but every 7 weeks I had to go to Richmond for 1 or 2 weeks. See, and that began to affect me physically.
Mm.
So I said, well, if I got to get off at 70 anyway, I'll just save these few years myself.
Well, let me go back to when you were first nominated for the court. And there was a lot of controversy about that. And I was wondering, how did you feel when that controversy began?
I'm relying on recollection and opinion rather. As you say, the controversy developed. And I went to my backers and I said, listen, it just isn't worth it. I'm going to have to quit at 70. Should I just step down? And they said, no, stay with it, stick with it. And I did.
Did you feel that you were unfairly criticized? Because I know that the NAACP head was one of the not opponents, but he was raising certain questions about your nomination.
No, I thought that was perfectly all right.
Did you ever have a conversation with him afterwards?
I don't recall. I remember Governor Wilder was in the Senate then, and I had a real good relationship with him. As a matter of fact, I voted for him for lieutenant governor and governor too after that. But I talked with him about it, and I said, I don't think you ought to, as far as race goes, I think I can be perfectly fair about it.
Do you know what the source of some of the charges were? Because I remember reading that there were some allegations about some lawyers feeling that they were not being fairly dealt with before the court. Do you know what the source of any of those allegations were?
No, I don't.
Did you ever find out later on, or did anyone ever
No.
pull you aside and did you ever hear who made any of those allegations? Who were the individuals who may have made them?
I thought it was some lawyers in Martinsville, but I've forgotten who they were now.
Mm-hmm.
It's been so long.
Did you know what may have started any of this?
No, some little controversy in probably in the courtroom or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to keep my mouth shut as much as I could in the courtroom because that's when you're talking when you should have been listening. That's when you get in trouble.
You talking about as a circuit judge or just a judge in general?
Circuit judge.
Uh-huh. Now, when you first came to the court, what was that like, your first day?
Well, I was in a different world, so to speak, a more important world, and I knew I had to give it the best I could, and that's what I was trying to do.
And you said I believe I read somewhere where you likened that world to almost being in a monastery. What were you used to?
Well, I wasn't used to being a member of a group of seven. See, I was used to doing it all myself. And then I had to tolerate. They had to tolerate my views, and I had to tolerate their views. And that's what I tried to do.
Did you find that you were in opposition to many of the justices on the court, or did you find that you were similar in your viewpoint?
Oh, I tried to be similar. I had few dissents in my day, but I tried to eliminate bickering continuously. Because in the meantime, the court was under a siege, so to speak, until we got the intermediate court in '85. We were just we had something all the time.
Explain what you mean.
Well, the docket was backed up. It took 2 years to get a case through the court. It had to be changed.
So you found the workload incredibly heavy?
Yeah. In many cases there, it probably shouldn't have been, especially too many automobile cases and things like that.
Explain that, the automobile cases.
Well, largely because insurance companies were trying to adjust to jury verdicts, and of course from that I got I got the view that really civil juries were no longer necessary. I mean, if we could do without them, the courts would work much faster, and justice would be much quicker, I thought.
What was the downfall in your mind of a civil jury?
Well, there was no consistency in the things at all.
And you believe that was a factor of what? What created this inconsistency?
Well, it was just like a rolling dice or jury verdict. Depended on who put up the best show.
Couldn't the judges intervene at all or overturn any of those decisions? Or
Yeah.
did you find that you often did that?
No, I didn't. See, there were no standards of how far a jury could go in a case. See. If there was any evidence to support it, then it had to go. I thought it ought to be more control over it.
And so on the state court, the state Supreme Court, what did you often, did you find yourself writing a majority opinion or the primary opinion to convince the rest of the justices to go along in your perception of these cases?
No, I didn't assert myself as I should have.
What would you have done differently?
I would have had closer control over jury verdicts. Don't say whatever they say, that's it.
So you felt that there was too much of a deference given?
Yeah. See, what you need is some degree of stability. If you get a degree of stability, then litigation will be settled without trial. But if you leave it wide open, like you're shooting crap, anything can happen.
Well, let me ask you a question that really has to do with, I guess, your personal team, secretaries, clerks, so forth. Were there people that you carried with you through your career, or did you hire new people as you went into different fields?
Yeah, new people.
Was your secretary while you were circuit judge different from your secretary once you were on the Supreme Court?
Yes.
Was that choice, or you had to change it, or?
That was a matter of choice.
And what were some of the qualities that you looked for?
You mean a secretary?
Mm-hmm.
Loyalty, punctuality, and ability to do the job. I had many very good ones, but I didn't want them writing opinions.
Well, now, when you were writing out your opinions, did you write it out longhand or did you type?
I dictated.
Oh, interesting. And you did all of your decisions that way?
I think so. That longhand was too slow for me. You'd lose the thought. Of course, that's another criticism I have of appellate practice, of judgments. There are too many opinions, and the opinions are too long. I spend most of my time now reading opinions, old opinions. But for the sake of the system, make them brief, and make them reasonably fast. Of course, the intermediate appellate court has solved a lot of those problems. I'm happy to say. The worst part about circuit work with sentencing. Being consistent in sentencing. And that's hard to do. Now you've got a life in front of you with years to run. You can ruin that life, or you can inspire it. I've had parents tell me when I was jogging on the track, said, "We hate you because you sentenced my son to penitentiary. But we changed our mind. You saved his life." They have real difficult decisions. And you can't let them go to bed with you. It'll drive you crazy. That's the only part of the circuit job that I didn't like.
Did you feel that kind of pressure when you got to the state Supreme Court?
No, because I could share it with 6 others, see, and I would usually get that way differently. I used to be, and still am, the existence of armed robberies is very depressing to me. It's a crime against civilization, and I don't know how we're going to ever solve it.
Well, now, were there any justices on the court that you found yourself either aligned with in most of the decisions or on opposing sides?
No. Well, there were very few divided opinions. It wasn't like Supreme Court of the United States. They split on almost every term, every case. But ours were different. Dissents were rare.
Why was that, do you think?
Because we wanted to stabilize the system.
So did you all have a lot of meetings if there were differences of opinion to try to?
No. I don't know. The appellate process, I don't know whether it helps or not. But we didn't have it. That you would lack consistency. You notice, last week, a week before last, this judge who was deciding the case on the flip of a coin, you can't stand for that. You got to strengthen the system.
Well, now, the clerks that you selected, did you select a different clerk every year when you were on the court?
What?
On the Supreme Court. Did you select a clerk every year?
The clerks. Oh, you mean your individual? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Did you find yourself leaning more towards a person from a certain law school or another, or did they come from different law schools?
Came from different law schools.
And what qualities did you look for in a clerk?
Well, intelligence the ability to work long hours. I had 3 clerks. And I wouldn't try to rate them, but I approved of all of them. But
Did you have both men and women? Did you have both men and women?
yes. I didn't go either side to begin with.
And have you kept up with what they're doing now? Have you kept up with what they're doing now?
No. One of them is a leader in the House of Delegates now, Ward Armstrong. He was my first law clerk. And he's maturing politically now.
Did you give him some advice early on?
No. Just stick to it.
Did he tell you at that time that he had an interest in going into politics?
No. But you can see it there anyway.
I have a few last questions, and because I know you're getting a little tired. I know you're getting a little tired, so I
Yeah.
just have a few last questions to ask you. When you went up to Richmond to hear the cases, did you have an apartment while you were up there, or did you stay at a hotel?
Hotel.
Which hotel?
John Marshall.
So you were with all the other justices who were staying at the John Marshall?
We'd meet in the evening and all have dinner together. And my wife just loved it.
So you all didn't talk shop in the evening?
I'm sure we did, but we shouldn't have. You just discussed issues of the day.
Did you find yourself, you and your wife, associating more with one group of justices than the other?
No.
It was just...
Because we were mainly at the hotel with people who didn't live in Richmond or in the immediate area.
Who were some of the justices at that hotel along with you?
Justice Cochran and Stanton, who is 95. I had known him in the House of Delegates and a great admirer of his. And of course, Chief Justice Anson was a great comfort to me when I first went on the court.
How so?
Hmm?
How so? How was he a great comfort?
Well, just by being associated with him.
Was it something about his personality?
Yeah, he had a dominant personality.
Well, last question. Were there any cases that you particularly remember during your experience on the Supreme Court that were either interesting, particularly interesting, or difficult, or exciting?
No particular ones. That I think back about it. As I reflect back in retirement, I go back on all my practice to try to correct mistakes that I may have made, or that things turned out differently than what I expected. But your memory, you lose them with time. I keep keep law books in the basement and read them frequently, to read old opinions, and to make sure that I understood what was being decided. And that's it.
Do you have any particular memories over your career or life that you find are especially significant to who you are today?
No. Things are changing so much. And the problem now is to adapt yourself to the change. I'd love to be trying cases right now, except for my hearing and my legs. But I better not do it.
Well, thank you so much for all of your time.
All right.